Hey there, so in this video I'm going to show you how to create a table and insert data into this table in a clean and efficient way using SQLITE3 on Python. And I want to mention that SQLITE3 is it's a fantastic program which can be expanded. You don't necessarily need the big guys like MySQL or MongoDB. You can actually use SQLITE3 and expand on it. So let's get started. The very first thing you need to do is you need to import SQLite3, and I just have some default data here. So I believe this is part of the Python library if you have the most recent version of Python, and I'm just mixing some default dummy data here. So yeah, so here's just some dummy data, and the thing you want to do is you want to create a function. So let me just, okay, so here we go. We're going to create a function. Um, I'm gonna call it dbGIF because we're actually putting data in, and then you're gonna need your your database name, the name of your database, and well, your database. Well, we're gonna put here when you put the equal sign, that means you're putting a default value, and essentially what you're doing is you're putting a path. So it could be this desktop, and then you can call it my database db, and that's for that. And then for the table name, you can call it anything you want. You can call it mytable. And then for the data, I suggest you put that in the form of, well, I'm doing it in the form of a dictionary, or yeah, so in the terms of a dictionary. So you have these curly brackets here and curly brackets here, and the data you put in will look in this form. It'll be separated by commas. This is the first part is the key, second part is the value, and you just keep on doing that with commas. So let's make another one here. Let's call that data 3. Well, let's actually make something that's more, let's say, name. And then over here we'll put on Bob. And here you can say age. And you can say, I don't know, 20. And maybe time. And you can put here, I don't know. Well, you can put anything down here. So let's put a string. Or let's not even time. Let's say address. And then you can say for something street. Okay, that looks good. Okay. Okay, so just reiterate, again, these here are your parameters, and these here are just default values. Like if you don't put anything in the parameter, it goes directly to the default value. So like you can, if you want, you can actually do it like this. You don't even have to put default values here. You can actually just do it like this. You do it like this if you want and make your function that way. But I highly suggest you make default values because I think it's a lot cleaner and it looks a lot nicer in my personal opinion. So first thing you want to do, you're gonna be using a for loop. Let me just here you want. So first of all, you want to make an empty list right here. You want to make an empty list, and I'm just gonna call it table data here, and then you're gonna be using a for loop, and you'll be looping over this here, this data, which is essentially this. Well, this is just default data here, but you're looping through it, and when you're looping through it, you're actually getting the keys. These are keys here. So this is a key here. Sorry, name is a key, age is a key, and address is a key. So you're looping over the keys. So we're going to be using a method called isinstance. So I'm going to write down here if isinstance, basically saying if it's an instance, and I have here a string. So over here, when you write down data, because data is basically the data itself, and then inside here you put in the key, and that actually gives you the value. So the actual dictionary, this is the dictionary, and then the key will give you the value. So you're saying if this value here is a string, then you want a specific statement. And the statement, or more specifically, you want to append. And this is what you want to append. You want to append. So this here is the table data, which is this here, this empty list. And you're appending, which means you're adding on. You're appending this tuple here. Actually, let me backtrack just a little bit, just to give you a little bit more context as to what we're doing. So ideally, at the end of the day, our table will look like this. It will look like with a bunch of tuples inside here, and then so on and so forth. So the whole bunch of tuples, and I guess you should separate them with commas. And inside these tuples, what you want is a string, which is basically the type. This is a text, a number, or float. So you want the type in here. And then you want the category name, or basically you want the name of the key name. Basically, these are the key name. You want the key name, or the category, as I like to call it. So you want the category, cat, and then you want the data itself. So we can say value. And essentially, this table data, you're creating something like this. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this here, just for clarity's sake. So you want something like that, and so on and so forth. So basically, you want to make a table data that looks like this: the type, the category, and the value. And that's what we're doing here in this table data. So we're just going to repeat what we did earlier here. So we're appending a table, and I guess we're putting the type. So if it's string, then we want text, then the key name, and then we want the data itself. And you want to just repeat that for all of this. Let me just tab that in. Let's tab this in. So here, again, is instance. So if this value here, because this is the dictionary and it's the key which gives you the value. So if this value is an integer, then you want to append this statement here: integer, the category name, and then the data itself. And you repeat this for real and numeric and blob. Blob is basically anything. It could be anything. For numeric, I believe I have it for lists, dictionaries, and sets. So if you want, just say that you want to insert into your database a list, a dictionary, or set, then it's a good idea to transform it into a string first before you stick it in. Okay. Okay, so now for the main part, the part that matters a little bit more. So this is sort of to get our data in a specific way that we want it to look. Okay, so the main part is to start the database. We want to make our connection. So over here, I made a variable called conn, and I believe this is the shorthand form for connection. So you write down SQLITE3 dot connection and your database name. So you can name your database anything you want. Here, I named it mydatabase.db, and I include the path. So here should have the entire path here into this portion here, and then you want to create a cursor, and I'll call this cursor, and then equals conn.cursor. And essentially, the cursor is basically a space where you can execute commands, because you have to execute commands somewhere, and you just can't put it anywhere. So essentially, you want to be executing commands inside. Well, I'll show you where you're supposed to execute the command. Hold on, give me a second. So under here, you write down cursor execute, and then you're gonna start putting your commands inside here, whatever statements. You're executing statements. And SQLite or all databases, but not just SQL, has a specific syntax of how they like to see their statements. So, but before we do this part here, we have to create the statement before we can execute it. So let's do that. But I just want to just so reference that if you do all this, you're gonna have to close. You have to commit, and you have to close your cursor. So you would type in cursor dot commit, and then brackets there, and then cursor or is it conn? Let me take a look here. Oops, my mistake. It's not cursor commit. It's conn commit and conn close. So when you finish everything, well, when you finish your statements, you want to put conn commit and conn close after the execute. However, So basically, it's gonna look like this. You can make your statement, and then you can have conn commit and conn close, and then everything should go through. However, if you use the with conn command, with conn, or with basically with the connection, right? Then you do not need these two statements in the end, and that's how we're gonna do things. We're just gonna do it like this. So the very first thing we want to do here, before we do this execute command, we want to make our table name. So I'm just going to copy and paste this here. So our table name will say table. And the reason I have this DB in front here, because I do notice that if you put a number there or anything kind of weird, then it doesn't work. So it has to be, the beginning has to be a string. So I typically put like a small string, like an easy understandable string like DB, and then I put our table name. And just to make things, just so like say just, and I put here the string just to ensure whatever you type inside here is a string. That's why I have this str there, is to ensure that it's all a string. That's very important. So when you're creating a table, you need to put a, because SQLITE3 and all databases has a specific syntax. So essentially, what you want to do is in this statement here, inside the statement here, you want to create like a statement such that it looks like this. It goes create table if not exist, and you want to stick your table name. The table name could be anything. It could be like my table. Actually, in our case, we called it DB, so it'll be DB my table. And inside here, you can write down our columns, or essentially our categories. So here will be name, age, for example, and what was the address? We did that earlier, address. But we don't know. So the reason we did this first part here is so that we can so well, how do I say this? How you want to do this is you want to make it such that you can insert an unlimited amount of data, and it would, and the statement would expand based on the data you put in. Um, just so you know, the very first part is you're always going to want to have an ID in here. Let me just put an ID. So the first part you want to have an ID, and you want to write the statement called integer primary key and name, and you know that name is a text. So you want to write down text, and you know the age is an integer, so you want to write down integer, and then over here this would be another text. So and essentially you want to build this statement in such a way that it does it all by itself. And we want to do it in a clever way. Also, you may want at the end here, you may want to include not null, meaning that there has to be a value. So how are we gonna do this? We're gonna make a couple statements here. Well, I'm gonna copy and paste this here. Paste. So the very first thing we need to do is that we need to make here we make a temporary. We're gonna make a temporary list here, right? And do you remember that table data that we created earlier up here? I'm just going to copy and paste this. Copy. And I'm just going to paste this right here so you guys can see. Here. Essentially, we don't need this. We don't need this last part here. I don't believe we need this last part. So, in a sense, this here is our table data that which we created earlier, and we're looping through that using a for statement. Right? But in truth, all we're really interested is in these two values. So we're interested in type and we're interested in category. We're not really interested in value. At this point right now, we're not interested in value. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put an underscore. Like there has to be something here in order for this to work, because we have a tuple with 3 stuff inside. That means we need three placeholders. This is 1, this is 2, and then this underscore will be the third one. And again, it's common convention to put an underscore, meaning that if there's something there, it's holding something, but it's not used. So here, in this BOM statement here, we are just appending, we're adding on to this list, the data name or the category here, and the data type which is the type. Sometimes it could be text, it could be number, and at the end, not null, which means that there has to be a value. And if you guys don't know, this is an F string. So when you make a string and you put an F in front of it, then you can actually use these curly brackets. these curly brackets to put your actual values in it. If you don't do that, then you're gonna have to use string formatting, which is I think I used to use a lot of string formatting in the past, but not so many anymore since I learned about this f string or fast string. So hopefully this will create this sort of statement, these statements right here. Where is it? Here. Name not null, age not null, or age, and same. These will create these statements here. I guess over here will be not null, and age text not null. Okay, that's good. So hold on. So I'm gonna make a variable here called columns. And you see this first part here? Because this does not look like the rest of it. That's why I put it here manually. Here. And again, this is an F string. Oops, let me just undo that. And I put a plus, which means you're concatenating strings. And I'm using this join statement. So essentially, I'm joining this data here. I'm joining it together, and I'm separating it with this string, with this comma. So I'm separating it with a comma and a space. And that will create our columns. This column part here. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to create this statement here. Create table. This is the statement that we want to create. And it's saying, I'm using an F string again, saying create table if not exists, and I'm putting my table name here, and I'm able to do that because this is a fast string or an F string, and I'm able to put my variables inside these curly brackets, and I have here columns. So it would actually recreate this statement below here. And then once we have this statement, we can just put it inside here. And there we go. We just created our table with our categories, our columns. Okay, now for the second part, now we have our table created. Now we want to insert data into our table, and we're doing the exact same thing. I'm just going to write here, part 2, insert data into our table, and what we're going to do here, essentially, is the same thing we did earlier, except we're going to make our statement looks a little bit different. But notice here that on the bottom here, I have the execute string. This is our statement, and then I have values here because we want to put it in such a way that it prevents injection. Actually, let me just do the code, and you'll see what I'm trying to say. Actually, before that, let me just give you a little bit of context. So basically, in SQLite, you want a statement that looks something like this, like insert over here. Copy E, let's paste that. Insert into, and then we have our table name, which is DB my table, something like that. We had our table. Oh yeah, my table, and then in brackets. We can put here in brackets. We want to put our category. I believe our category was something like I think it's brackets name, or not even that's name, age, and address here. And then we want to put our values in. And what's a little bit different is that instead of, you can actually put the values in here if you want, but they suggest putting question marks instead, separated by commas. So question mark, and another question mark, and they're separated by commas. So this is how they want you to put the statement in this execute string, like this. And then over here, so that would be this part here, and then the values would just be that would just be a list. So I'm over here, values, and this will be the list of data. Okay, let's get into that part. Okay, so we do not need to do anything for table because this is already done. We already made it earlier here. This is our name. Our table name is already done for us. Now we got to make the categories. So here, I have this statement here. So essentially, these are the data keys. So if you remember our data, in our raw format data, in order for you to get the keys, which are, if you look up here, this is a key here, this is a key here, this is a key here. We're going to be using a statement called keys. And I'm using the statement right here, data keys. set keys. So when I data dot keys, and they'll give me the keys. And then I'm using this method called join, and I'm joining the keys together with a comma. So they're all joined together with a comma in between. So that's our category. Okay, so now we need our values. So when I've already made a list here called values. Let me just copy and paste this here. Oh, we don't need two of them. We just need one of them. So data. Oh, sorry, values with an S. Let me just format this. If there we go. That's not right. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna make an empty list. Again, you can use comprehension list if you know how to use comprehension list, but I'm just doing it this way for you beginners. And sometimes it's a lot more easier to read and to follow this way. So here I'm using a for statement, and I want the data values. So again, we're using this sort of method here, value with a bracket. We're using this method, and basically we're getting this here. We're getting Bob and 20 and well, well over here here something streets. Do we have this? Yeah. Address is something street, so the something street. So we're just getting the values from this data. So back down here, we're using this method here. So this is our data, and this method here gives us the values. And we want to make sure it's a list. That's why I wrote this down here, list. And it's just to make sure that this here is a list and nothing else. So basically, saying for val, right, in this data list, is saying if there's an instance, if val is an instance of a list, dictionary, and set, you want to append it as a string, because it has to be string when you append it. If it's not a string, then it's not going to work. So that's why I'm doing it this way. And if it's not any of these, assuming it's a number or a string, then I'm just going to append it as is. So that's our values right here. So this is done. And the last part is these question marks. And that's the easy part. So to get the question marks, what we're going to do, let me just paste this here. Oops. Let me just tap that in. Tap that in. I don't need that. We'll do like this. Oops. Just go back down where we are. Here we go. So again, we're using a for loop. Like you can put I here. A lot of people put I. So I'm using this this here because we want to loop. You want to loop through the data. Like we don't know how much data is in there, so we're gonna loop through it. Right now we have three pieces of data, so we're using this method called len. And since there's three pieces of data in our dictionary, this here, the statement here, len data should return the number 3, because right now we only have 3 values in our dictionary. And range is it basically is used for loops, tells it to loop through this over 3 times. And again, I'm using I as a value, but if you're not actually using I, then it's best practice to use an underscore, meaning that you're looping through it, but you're not exactly using the values of I. Up here, I have a empty list, and I'll be appending essentially these question marks into the empty list. So basically, I'm making a list of question marks. And in this last statement here, question marks, I'm going to join, because I'm essentially making a string. I'm joining that list of question marks and separating them with a comma. And I believe that is it. That's all you need to do. So we have our table, that's done, our category, which is done, our question marks, which is done, and then we made our values, which is done. And so we're executing the statement, goes in this first part and separated by a comma with values. And yeah, that's all you need to do just to insert data into your function, into your database. And you may want, you can if you want, you don't have to, but you can do a return statement just to show, so you see something that comes back. So you can say string execute, and then you can just separate that with a plus, like you can concatenate that with a space if you want, and then another plus, and then you can say values, and you need to make sure that's a string because Well, you don't have. I suggest you make it a string because you don't want any mistakes. So you can actually return this statement here, just so you get something back, and that's it. That's about it. That's everything you need to know for inserting data into it, making a database and inserting data into it.